Greetings, mortals. Today, I badmouth the TTRPG community's most favorite die, the D20. And I tell you why 2d6 is a far superior option. Welcome to Tabletop Sandbox, where we talk about all things TTRPG. I am also known as Harrison Tarr. So, what the heck am I actually talking about? Do I really hate D20s? No, of course not. I think that the D20 system is incredible, and I've been using it for my entire TTRPG career, pretty much. But I do want to introduce this idea I was introduced to the first time I read through the Dungeon World rulebook, how having varying levels of success built into the mechanics of the game is actually an incredible way to play. First, let me explain how I view the way a D20 works when you roll it in games like D&D or Pathfinder. Basically, you have a set DC difficulty class, whether that be your target's armor class or a difficulty class set by your GM. You roll attempting to hit a specific number. If you hit that number or surpass it, you succeed. If you fall short of that number, you fail. Pass or fail. Those are your only two options. There is no nuance to the results of that die roll. Some tables use a homebrew, especially on skill checks, where there are varying levels of success. Where if you hit the lowest DC, you get the baseline of information. This is usually used for like religion or arcana, or basically information gathering checks. If you hit that lowest DC, then you get the basic information, and then if you hit ascending DCs after that, you get more and more information. But that's not generally how the dice system works, and that's purely additional homebrew. Now let me tell you how Dungeon World does this better. And by this, I mean rolling dice in general. In Dungeon World, every time you roll, except for damage, you roll 2d6. You don't roll a d20. You might add a single modifier to it from the associated ability, but overall it's pretty simple. If you roll a 6 or lower on these 2d6, it is a failure. If you roll a 7 to 9, it is a partial success or a success with a cost or a twist. And if you roll a 10 plus, it is a complete success. Now, these aren't exactly DCs because they never change. A 6 or below is always a failure, a 7 plus is always a success, and a 10 plus is always a complete success. This means for pretty much every single roll, players have over a 50% chance of success. However, they have a much smaller chance of just a complete success with no complications. An example of a partial success or a success with a twist is, yes, you hit that target with your arrow, but in doing so, you've exposed yourself or put yourself in a dangerous position and gotten noticed by the enemy who is now coming for you. Or an example is you get your foot stuck while you're trying to sneak around, and your options are either keep moving at the same speed and make some noise, or stop, wait, take some time, lose those valuable seconds, and pull your foot free quietly. This is a really interesting mechanic that kind of opened my mind the first time I read through the Dungeon World rulebook, and I kind of fell in love with it because it gives a lot more nuance, gives a lot more options to a player's succeeding or failing. It gives a halfway point where they can succeed, but with a complication. And that complication, that conflict, is what makes stories interesting. And after all, TTRPGs are all about collaborative storytelling, at least the way I play them. Another great thing about this 2d6 system is that even if you roll a 6 or lower, you don't get nothing. You are actually rewarded by being able to mark XP. Every failed roll is getting you closer to leveling up and unlocking cool new abilities that let you succeed better next time. Another thing I should mention is that Dungeon World is a player-facing system. And what that means is that it's only the players that roll. The GM doesn't roll unless maybe they're supplementing their game with random tables, but that's not really part of Dungeon World anymore, is it? Only the players roll. This means that rolls are multi-purpose. If the players succeed on that roll, either partially or fully, then they're doing something. But if the players either only succeed partially or fail, then it also means that their enemies, the monsters, are doing something. A failed roll often directly corresponds to the monster doing something that is really not great for the players, for their party. And what these kind of multi-purpose roles mean is that after every single roll, something meaningful happens or changes. And that is a great way at keeping your players interested and invested in the way that the game is going. In D&D, oftentimes, if a player character fails a roll, then nothing happens. They just didn't succeed at what they were trying to do, and they don't get to do anything for that turn. In Dungeon World, if a player fails that roll, it means the situation has changed and gotten worse for the PCs. Overall, I think that this 2d6 system is far superior than the d20 dice system used in most games because of that added nuance it has built into the mechanics. If you've never played or read through Dungeon World, I would highly recommend picking it up. Reading that book through for the first time changed the way that I think about TTRPGs. And I just want to add a disclaimer here for the inevitable people who are mad at me on the internet. I don't actually have a problem with the D20 system. I feel like I said this already at the beginning. All right, no secondary disclaimer. I'm not apologizing for my opinion. Oh, one last thing. If you agree that... then subscribe and leave a comment about it below. Good night, mortals.